Welcome to Influential Women of Washington State. I'm Katie Hall. In this episode, we explore the criminal justice system. Justice U talks about the importance of using and exercising your voice.
It's important, frankly, that women of color and other voices are at the table. I mean, you hear more and more, I want to be in the room where the decisions are made.
Absolutely.
So it's a real privilege to be there. But I would say there's a need for a lot of different voices, and I know that I bring one particular perspective to the table. Now, there are 9 of us, and that means 9 different views. But the most important takeaway is that, right, my voice is there, I'm present, I'm participating in the discussion. But the other thing that you mentioned is, you know, we are part of a criminal justice system. We're part of a larger system with the idea of trying to dispense justice, but the result isn't always just. And it's just because sometimes the law is very limited in terms of our role. We're simply interpreting statutes, we're interpreting the Constitution, and sometimes, as much as we want to get to the right place, we can't get there. Sometimes change is also incremental because it's case by case by case. We can't just make the law, right? The facts of a case dictate what the outcome might be sometimes. And as they say, bad facts sometimes make bad law. So living with bad results at times can be a challenge, and yet I'm confident that my colleagues on the court right now are really attempting to do the right thing and come to the right decisions. We're all very concerned about a criminal justice system that over-incarcerates, that has a disproportionate impact on people of color, and frankly, that doesn't have the right solution to how we handle juveniles. So that's a concern for me, and it's a concern for our court.
And so how do you handle that? Like because you have to wear 2 different hats. I mean, probably several hats, I'm sure, but in this situation, you have to wear a hat of a woman of color, and then you also have to wear the hat of the law. And not that they're separate, but they are sometimes. And so, like, how do you handle that? How do you navigate through that type of waters?
Well, probably being more bold than I should, in the sense that, you know, I'm convinced that we can't take our skin off anywhere that we go, no matter what. And we have to bring that to the table, and our perspective has to really try to influence the decisions at the end of the day. The one thing that most people don't know is that as a justice or a judge, we don't just make decisions. We're involved administratively in the court system as well. So I get to participate on commissions. I get to establish task forces that will look at these kinds of questions and try to bring change about outside of our cases. So we look at court rules, we try to look at procedures, we try to really educate judges to find alternatives to incarceration, to promote a dialogue. So there's a lot of other things that we can do to try to advance justice. And I'd have to say that when I'm not on the bench, I try to spend a lot of time doing that.
There is a lot of people in the community that consider the criminal justice system unjust, especially when you think about a few years ago, and still today, but especially a few years ago when we had all the shootings happening with police officers and people of color and Black men in particular. You know, what do you say to those community members about the work that's being done, maybe in the background and some of the stuff that we don't see?
Well, I first start with the premise that the criminal justice system is broken. There's no question about it, and anybody who doesn't believe that needs to work within it. It's broken. We're all trying to fix it, and I believe there's a lot of people of good faith trying to really undo old policies and try to sort this out. As a court, we're sometimes limited, and yet we control procedures. So we are very concerned, again, about the use of over-incarceration. We're concerned about putting juveniles with adults. We're concerned about, you know, life sentences for juveniles when we've been told by the U.S. Supreme Court that you can't do that. So I would say overall, all of the pieces together, I hear a lot of good voices, and I hear a lot of people trying to sit down and work it out. And to come up with some other solutions. The most important thing was getting everybody to agree that the system is broken, and I think we're finally there.
Good, that's huge.
It is
huge. That's huge. Now, in our lifetime, do you see us fixing this broken system?
I do. I would not be here. I do. I believe each one of us has the power to bring about change, and the fact that we already have made some significant changes says to me, we can do it. We can do better. We can do it faster. We can be more aggressive. But I have great faith in our ability to do it. We just got to sometimes drag people along, but I believe that we can.
So what about by 2030? So 2030, NASA plans to have us in Mars, right? Or have at least some astronauts in Mars. By 2030, where do you see the justice system?
Hopefully I see a small prison population. Hopefully I see no juveniles in jail. And the reason why I have hope is I look at some of the creative programs that even here in King County that are being developed by the prosecutor himself, right? Ways to keep kids out of the system. Even though they might have done something, how do you divert it? He's using peace circles. He's diverting people out of the system. So you start with one prosecutor, and I think that that could grow. He's had a change of heart and a change of mind, and the policies are radically different, that there are other ways to look at the problem. King County, for the first time, is going to be treating juvenile justice as a health issue rather than a criminal justice problem.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
moving,
huge.
that's absolutely right, is to, it requires that you look at it a different way. So I'm convinced, and I remain optimistic, that people are willing to step up to the table. We have new leaders, new voices, and that's going to bring about the change. So 2030, I say we have more community centers, more treatment courts, smaller jail population overall.
I just love Justice Yu. She goes a layer deeper with us on what it means to be on the justice team.
I co-chair the Minority and Justice Commission. This is a Supreme Court commission that our function and purpose is to really look at race in the criminal justice system and in our courts and ask what is it that we could do different. So this year, I'm very proud that one of our focal points was legal financial obligations and the debt that that places on poor people in our system. So together with a number of organizations, people that you would not think we would be working with, but jointly the prosecutors, the ACLU, Columbia Legal Services, a host of people came together to say, we've got to look at relief. We have to find a way to relieve people of this debt. The interest rate on legal financial obligations until now was 12%. And finally, the legislature agreed and has reduced it to 0% for the first time. That's the kind of project that we've taken on. It's taken years to get here, but imagine the difference it makes to people who have fines and sanctions and can never be relieved of it. Your whole life, you never get really a second chance.
Absolutely. So is that like restitutions?
Well, restitution would be different because that's payment to a victim, but then there's all these other things that are imposed on somebody at a sentencing. For example, it might be a sanction as a punishment. It could be fees to recover for the costs of putting on a trial, for the cost of a public defender, for the costs of a host of things. Unfortunately, I'm convinced we should not impose those on individuals, but nevertheless, in this state, courts are funded through these legal financial obligations, and it's a way to recover the costs of running the criminal justice system. Not fair to begin with, but if the court has to do that, how do we do it in a way that's individualized and acknowledges somebody's ability to pay?
Is it hopeful to think that the actions that we do to address issues of race and oppression of different populations also helps address issues of gender bias? And are those synergistic things that we can also look to and see that, I mean, in a way, that's the allyship of race consciousness supporting gender consciousness.
In a related way, there's been global work that shows that in countries and communities where women have equal opportunity, where they're able to have education and jobs, the whole society flourishes. It's not just the women that benefit, everyone benefits. And I think you're talking about a corollary to that, which is undoubtedly just as true. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about one thing about the economic status of America right now. And then I also want to ask about the economic status of Americans. And then also let's think about the Pacific Northwest as well, because we're in a pretty fruitful environment financially in comparison to other places, right? In Seattle, in the Seattle metro area. But yeah.
I talk about this a fair amount these days, so it's just like on my mind. But I've been talking these days about there being two Seattles, and I really mean two King Counties and sort of two Northwests, especially with the suburbanization of poverty. But there are people who can look across a small water expanse or drive a few blocks and they see a life expectancy that changes by 14 years. There are disparities that are so clustered into micro pockets and micro civilizations in this city that is wealthy. You know,
That's true.
We have the 5th whitest city in the country still, but we also have zip codes that are the 7th most diverse in the country. And there are two Seattles,
Just living in
two
one.
King Counties, two Northwests, and one of them does not experience that great benefits of resource that the other one does.
Yeah.
I'm
Good
just-
point. No,
Well,
good point. Good
And,
point.
and I think it's interesting. We have this great. I mean, we have the economy in this area is just booming, and but it creates a very interesting side effect, which is we're turning into like a DC or some of those cities where you can't afford to live in
That's
these
true.
cities, right? I mean, we're talking about faculty and staff here at Bellevue College, and we talked about how hard it is for anybody to live in Bellevue.
We have really got a hollowing out of the middle in a number of ways. On the income side, you see a lot of highly paid jobs, the tech industry and a lot of our professions, but we also see a lot of low paid jobs, and that growth is happening at the high and low end. In the housing market, on the other hand, as housing prices continue to go up, and as you see all these cranes everywhere, drive through Seattle at night and look at the lines of the cranes lighted up, but they're building very high-end housing. The housing just is very expensive. And so where people with middle income, fixed income, or low income can afford to live, either you've got a place already and you stay there for a long time, or it's very hard. It's hard to rent in, it's hard to buy in, and people move very far away.
It causes
And
another
then
issue.
it causes
Yeah.
it causes a traffic issue, but a quality of life issue. You're having to work longer hours, commuting and working to make less money and have less time to do all the things that you should want to do in your life and with your family. Where it creates a downward spiral. That's something I have to say that we're working really hard at as a community. I mean, all of the discussions around housing affordability right now, it is the hot topic. There's a big effort at Seattle, there's a big effort at King County. The state is continually looking at ways to provide more resources, but we're behind. We've done some research recently. We're at least 150,000 housing units behind where we ought to be.
Wow.
And that is if you could just make them appear today. If you, assuming the growth we know we're going to have, it's much worse than that. And we really need to start having community conversations about truthfully making space for the next generation and for the people who live here now who can't afford to be near where they would want to be. Those are some hard discussions. That means infill development. That means taking somebody's neighborhood and it may look and feel a little different, but that's so that we can have a whole community where people can all have a place to live and be healthy. I think it's the biggest challenge facing our region right now.
Wow.
And I think places, DC, the people who work in DC are always the people who come in from outside because it's so expensive. We have the problem that we have similar issue where if you're in Bellevue or Seattle, we just don't have the transportation that they have there. So that's compounding, that problem as well.
And I think there's work all over. There are grassroots community groups doing important things. There's Africa Town really trying to reclaim Central District for
The
its
displacement
African
problem
heritage.
is,
I mean, it's not just having to travel, it's
destroying
also
communities, yeah.
you're farther away from your grandparents, you're farther away from
Right.
your church, you're farther away from where you get your hair done, you're farther away from the things that actually define what it means to be a community.
Wow.
As a millennial, I mean, what can millennials do to change that? I mean, what can we do? Where do we start?
I'll jump in if you don't mind. There's a real movement kind of growing now, and it seems to be largely, as many of them are, populated by young people. And one thing I've seen it called is the YIMBY movement. So you've heard the term NIMBY, which means not in my backyard. The YIMBY means yes in my backyard. There are better terms for it, but I love YIMBY. I think that's cool. And these are younger people coming out and saying, hey, like the Florida kids saying, we're here. How are we ever going to be able to afford a home the way our parents could when, a starter home is over $500,000, when the average price of a home in East King County is over $900,000,
That's
almost $1 million
ridiculous.
for average
Yes.
home. So, and I think that we, the older generation, will hear that because you're our younger brothers and sisters, because I'm that young, but you're also children, and we want families to be able to live near their families and not to have to sort of spread out, to your point about breaking up communities. I think that having those people be a counter voice to there will always be people who come out against change.
Right.
We're not hardwired to love change as human beings, right? We want everything to stay the same. I think having young people especially come and say, no, things have to change for us to have a healthy community for everybody. that helps a lot to hear those positive voices for change.
Especially for women.
Yeah.
You know, I love that Harriet Beecher Stowe quote that women are the true architects of society. And I think this is almost a rallying point of identity and presence for women.
So you're known as being a woke leader. Talk to us a little bit about what that means to you, because we hear that a lot. Like I always hear that when they're like, "Oh, Justice, you is woke," and so I guess what does that terminology woke means? And then so like, how do you feel about getting that title?
First of all, it's an honor. Talk about a badge of honor. For me, it's really being a person of conscience and having your eyes open and seeing what you see, right? Recognizing the injustices and owning it. I could divorce myself from it and say, oh no, I'm not engaged. But at the same time, I think, you know, we all have to be woke today in terms of walking around with your eyes open and seeing what you see. Look at the oppression, look at the poverty, look at the homelessness, and do something about it. I think you can just walk away and say, I don't see it, and to me, that's, right, sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
It means, for me, being aware, having a conscience, and having, frankly, the guts to speak about it.
There's a terminology about women needing or wanting a seat at the table. And so I've been playing around with that idea over the last, I don't know, the last maybe 2 to 3 months, is do women really need a seat at the table? Or do we need to be brave enough and courageous enough to create our own tables? Or is it a combination of both? What are your thoughts?
I think it's both. I think that there are institutions, no matter what, that exist. And I'll give an example, and that's frankly the court, right? The court has always existed, it will exist, and it moves into the future. And we can't create our own parallel system of justice. This is the system, and we've got to be at the table. You know, one of the more popular songs in Hamilton, right, is I Want to Be in the Room Where It Happens, is recognizing that decisions, power is sitting in a particular room and we deserve to be there. At the same time, whenever we can create a parallel system, a parallel way of doing things, we ought to do that and create that other table.
So talk to us a little bit about the reason why women need to consider, or not need, but they may want to consider being a part of the justice system. What's the importance of that voice of a woman?
Oh my gosh, I think there aren't enough lawyers in society. I know that most people don't buy that. But you know, lawyers are the individuals who really are the defenders of democracy and the rule of law. When you think about that moment where, whether regardless of what you agree or not, but when this president decided to issue a travel ban and people were stuck at airports around the world, the people who went to the airports were lawyers, simply trying to make sure, right, that the rule of law was being applied, that families wouldn't be broken up, that somehow there would be a recourse for individuals who were stuck in that dilemma at the moment. And there was never a time that I was more proud when I looked at, you know, watched the television and saw the pictures. Lawyers were everywhere in every airport across this country, sitting on the floor with laptops, writing habeas petitions, writing to a court to say, please intervene in order to protect this individual family. So the role of a lawyer is so important. So now then we look at, well, who are the lawyers? And in fact, we still need more women and more women of color. And so I keep saying to many women, look at the legal profession. We need you. We need your voice. We need your experience. We need you to be the person also who defends somebody else. We are doing much better than we ever have, but still it's not good enough until there's 100%. And yet our court, right, our court is a supermajority female court. 6 of the 9 are women. So that's a big change.
That is. That's huge.
It's huge.
It is.
Only one woman of color, but nevertheless, we're getting
still
there.
You know, it's a gradual change.
That's right.
And so how do we get the young girls to start looking at this? I would say as early as like elementary school.
I agree.
Yeah, how do we make that happen?
We go to schools, we bring them to the Temple of Justice, I put them in my chair, and I say, imagine yourself as a justice, right? Because if you can trigger in a little girl what it feels like to have power, to be there, maybe they'll think about it as they're thinking about careers, that they'll say, I want to be a justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely. Representation is very important, and being able to put it in their minds and for them to be able to see it. Does that happen enough in our state? Is there enough schools that come out there and visit you all?
I am surprised at how many. I have to
Oh,
admit, I didn't
nice.
realize every day
You have
there
someone coming
are
out there.
classrooms of kids who come. They used to only go to the legislature, and now they come over to the court every
That's very
single
good.
day. A lot of mock courts, a lot of moot courts, a lot of opportunities for kids to come.
And so, what would you say to that young workforce as far as like the biggest area of adversity you have experienced in your life and how you overcame it?
You know, I think the most important thing that young girls and women need to really embrace and own is that their life is important and that their dream is achievable. So many young people are simply afraid to pursue that dream, the lack of confidence. And what I continue to say, young lawyers, young women, girls, is believe in yourself. Believe that your voice is legitimate. Believe that your dream is achievable, and don't let anything get in the way, no matter what. And I have to admit that for me, I suppose I was arrogant enough as a kid, coming from a disadvantaged background in Chicago, is to have some sense of belief in myself, to be sassy enough to push back, to not shut up when you're supposed to, and just hear your own voice and claim it and own it and say that you have a place in this world.
Yeah, being from Detroit, I think I feel the same way. Isn't that interesting though? Sometimes when some of the kids that have the most disadvantages, they turn out to be significant leaders. I think that's pretty interesting because, to your point, sometimes those disadvantages can turn into real advantages.
Oh, and being
Yes.
tenacious really is a
Yes,
value. It's
it
a
is.
value. And I think in the past, people might not have seen it that way. I mean, this is why today, you know, I so admire somebody like Nikita Oliver, right? Here's a poet, here's a lawyer who's found a voice. And it's not a voice that everybody wants to embrace, but what I love is the courage to speak it. And I think that that helps inform the wider society about where we are. Again, we don't all have to embrace one another's political views, but to have the voice and the courage to speak it is really what matters at the end of the day.
But is there a particular success story that stands out to you that you're proud to speak about?
Wow, gee. You know, nothing comes to mind at the moment.
Even if it's with laws that you help to create or maybe get a second set of eyes to look at.
Sure. I'm very proud of the decisions in which I authored a primary decision with my colleagues. So I'm very proud of one particular case in which was a 9-0 that really acknowledged that farm workers deserve a rest break and they ought to be paid for the rest break. And it seems so insignificant, and yet it's significant when you really look at, you know, the dignity of the human person, and the way that we encourage people, right, to take a rest break is by paying them for that time period. So it was a very tough case, and yet at the same time, my colleagues agreed with me that that's what the law required, no matter how difficult or unpopular the decision might be. That was true justice being done, and I'm very proud of that one.
Yeah, absolutely, especially here in the state of Washington. I mean, we have so many firms. I mean, that right there is very impactful, and it's impactful to everybody because we're buying that fruit, the fruit and the vegetables afterwards to have in our homes. And I believe if you take care of your people, they take care of their customers.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So it actually impacts all of us at the end of the day.
It does. And again, the other side was, well, this is going to increase the cost to the owners. And yet I'm confident that that's the kind of cost that, frankly, somebody like yourself, a consumer, would say, I'm happy to pay that increase, knowing that there's justice at the end of the day.
Absolutely. What do you say to that next generation about being an influential woman and the responsibility of that?
You know, I feel like I was an accident. So what I would say to many young women is imagine yourself right here in my seat. I have done nothing extraordinary to get here other than to be true to myself. So there could be 50 women who could fill my slot because I believe we have the deep bench and the talent in our community. It's just that when the opportunity comes up, you've got to be ready to just launch. There's no waiting for the perfect moment. There's no waiting for recruitment. You just step in when the opportunity comes up and you be true to yourself. And I feel that that's all I've really done.
Thanks for joining us in our exploration of leadership. We hope you're encouraged and inspired by Justice Yu and women like her, leading our criminal justice systems across the nation. Please join us for future episodes of Influential Women of Washington State to hear more in-depth discussions with extraordinary women. Until next time, I'm Katie Haw.